Amidst rain-slicked streets and a leaning theatre, Jungkook saw his chance to shine. But the audience stared back in silence, cold, motionless. A smile that wasn't his took the stage. Who would you be if someone else stole your face? He sang and lost everything. The story begins with the gleam of a dream and descends slowly, so slowly, into the deepest shadows of the mind. Picture a small town so quiet it seems to hold its breath. The cobblestone streets are wet from the fine drizzle that fell all day, reflecting the grey sky of an autumn that has dragged on for weeks. The surrounding trees are tall and thin, their golden and red leaves falling silently, piling up on the crooked sidewalks. The air is cool, heavy with the sweet scent of damp earth. But there's something else underneath, a faint hint of smoke, as if someone somewhere were burning old wood. In the heart of this nearly forgotten town stands the Star Theatre, a wooden building that had seen better days. The walls are crooked, stained with damp, and the roof seems to groan under the weight of time. Fogged windows let through a dim light, and the faded sign creaks in the wind, its letters barely legible. It's here that Jungkook, a young singer with a voice that cut through silence like a blade, is about to take the first major step of his career. Jungkook arrives in town on an afternoon already fading into early dusk, the rented car bumping along the gravel road that cuts through the surrounding fields. He is thin, with shoulders slightly slumped, as if carrying more dreams than certainties, his black hair falling over brown eyes that shone with a mix of anxiety and hope. The car radio hissed, unable to find a clear station, and he turned it off, letting the silence of the road take over. When he parks in front of the hotel, a low building of faded brick with a flickering neon sign that read, "Vacancy," the engine died with a weary sigh. He grabbed his backpack from the back seat, the rough fabric scraping against his fingers, and entered the lobby. The floor was cracked linoleum, the air smelled of mothballs and something sour, and the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with graying hair in a loose bun, barely looked up from her book behind the counter. "Room 12, she murmured, handing him a cold metal key, her voice as dry as the leaves outside. In the room, Jungkook tossed his backpack onto the bed, which groaned under even his light weight. The mattress was thin, its springs poking through the rough sheet, and the floral wallpaper was peeling at the edges, revealing dark stains beneath that seemed to shift if you stared too long. He opened the window, the fogged glass yielding with a groan, and the cold wind swept in, carrying the distant caw of a crow. He sat down, took out his phone, and reviewed the lyrics for the songs he would sing tomorrow, the screen's blue light reflecting on his face. "It's just one show," he whispered to himself, rubbing his sweaty palms on his jeans. But it wasn't just one show. It was the chance to leave behind gigs in stuffy bars with beer-sticky floors for real stages, real lights, real audiences. He smiled, but the smile trembled, and there was a tightness in his chest he couldn't explain, a shadow of doubt he pushed away as he put his phone away and tried to sleep. The night passed restlessly. Jungkook woke several times, the building's creaks mingling with confusing dreams of voices that trailed off mid-sentence. When the sun rose weak and pale behind heavy clouds, he was already up, his stomach churning with nerves. He drank bitter coffee at the diner next to the hotel, the liquid burning his throat, and watched the town's few inhabitants through the window. A man in a grey coat pushed an empty shopping cart past, its metal wheels screeching on the ground. An old woman swept the sidewalk in front of a closed shop, her movements slow, almost mechanical, and when Jungkook passed her on his way to the theatre, she stared at him for too long, her small dark eyes fixed on him as if she knew something he didn't. He quickened his pace, the cold wind biting his cheeks, his backpack bumping against his back, and tried not to think about her stare. The Star Theatre was just a few blocks away, and when he arrived, the building looked even older in the daylight. The front door groaned open, and the lobby was a dark, narrow space, with a red carpet so threadbare it barely covered the wooden floor. A cobweb-covered chandelier swayed gently from the ceiling, its bulbs dark, and the air was heavy with the damp smell of mold mixed with something sweeter, like melted wax. The theatre manager, a short man with crooked glasses and a wrinkled shirt, greeted him with a limp handshake, his palm damp and cold. "The audience is going to love you," he said, his hoarse voice scratching the silence as he led Jungkook down the hall to the stage. Jungkook nodded, forcing a smile, but something in the man's tone and odd certainty made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. On stage, he did his sound check, the microphone cold against his fingers. The lights were dim, yellowish, casting long shadows across the empty rows of seats. The buzz of the spotlights was a constant hum, like insects in a forest at night, and when he sang a verse, his voice echoed clearly, filling the space. But something was wrong. There was an echo that shouldn't have been there, deeper, as if another voice answered from a distant corner of the theater. He stopped, frowning, his heart giving a lurch, but the sound tech, a thin figure hidden in the wings, just waved a bony hand and shouted, "Sounds fine!" Jungkook shook his head, laughing at himself, the sound forced. Just nerves, he thought as he stepped off the stage to explore. Backstage, he found abandoned dressing rooms, their doors ajar, revealing cracked mirrors that reflected fragments of the dark hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots, and the air here was colder, heavy with the scent of dust and something metallic he couldn't place. In one of the dressing rooms, he saw a table coated in a thick layer of dust, and on it a stack of old programs, the paper yellowed and brittle. He picked one up, the dry paper rustling like a whisper, and opened it. A black and white photo showed a young man on stage, microphone in hand, the audience blurred in the background. The singer's face was thin, his eyes deep set, and there was something familiar about him, perhaps a curve in his chin or the way he held the microphone, but Jungkook couldn't remember where he'd seen him. He tucked the program into his pocket, his heart beating a little faster, and continued exploring. Further in, he found a narrow staircase leading down to the theater's basement. Curiosity pulled him, and he descended, the steps groaning under his weight. Downstairs, the air was damp, almost viscous, and the smell of wet earth was so strong he could taste it. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, its dim light revealing stacked boxes, pieces of broken sets, and what looked like a pile of old clothes in a corner. He moved closer, the cold floor beneath his boots, and realized they weren't clothes. They were pieces of mannequins, plastic arms and legs tossed aside like trash, some cracked, others with peeling paint. He backed away, his stomach tightening, and hurried back up, the sound of his own footsteps echoing behind him as if someone were following. The day passed in a blur of preparations, and when night fell, the theater felt different, more alive in a way he couldn't explain. Jungkook got ready in his dressing room, his heart pounding as he put on a black jacket, the rough fabric against his skin. He ran his fingers through his hair, the cracked mirror giving back a distorted reflection of his face, and heard the muffled murmur of the audience arriving, a sound that made him smile. They came, he thought, his chest swelling with hope. But when he stepped onto the stage, the hot lights burning his skin, he realized something was wrong. The audience was there, rows packed, faces turned toward him, but no one clapped, no one whispered, no one moved. He blinked, confused, sweat trickling down his forehead. "Maybe they're waiting," he murmured, gripping the microphone. He began to sing, his clear voice cutting through the cold air, but the audience's silence was like a void swallowing every note. The buzz of the lights grew louder, almost a roar, and the faces, pale and motionless, looked wrong, like ill-fitting masks. Jungkook tried to ignore the silence, focusing on the music, on the notes pouring from his throat as if they were the only thing keeping him anchored. The hot stage lights burned his skin, sweat dripping down the back of his neck and onto the wooden floor, leaving small dark spots. He gripped the microphone tighter, his fingers slipping on the damp metal, and moved on to the next song, a slow ballad he'd written during a sleepless night months ago. His voice echoed through the theater, soft and trembling, but the audience's emptiness was like a weight pressing on his chest, suffocating every word. He looked down, trying to find a friendly face, anyone who might smile or nod, but the eyes staring back at him were fixed, glassy, lifeless. The buzz of the lights intensified, a sound that seemed to crawl into his ears, and he felt a chill crawl up his spine, as if icy fingers were tracing his back. Between songs he paused, the silence falling like a heavy curtain. The air was colder now, tinged with that faint metallic scent again. He took a step forward, the stage steps creaking under his boots, and slowly descended, his heart hammering so loud he swore he could hear it echoing in the theater. "Hey everyone," he said, forcing a light tone, his voice trembling at the end. No response. He approached the front row, the rough floor scraping against his soles, and reached out to touch a woman's shoulder. Her skin was cold, hard, like chilled wax beneath his fingers. He snatched his hand back, a scream caught in his throat, and looked closer. Her eyes were glass, her mouth slightly open in a painted smile, her blonde hair falling in stiff strands over her shoulders. He stumbled back, tripping on a step, and scanned the audience. They were all like that. Mannequins, dozens of them, lined up in the seats, dressed in worn clothes, threadbare coats, yellowed shirts, crooked hats, plastic faces with expressions that were almost human, but not quite. Their eyes gleamed under the lights, reflecting the stage at angles that seemed to follow him, and he felt his mind spin, the floor tilting beneath his feet. "Who did this?" he murmured, his voice barely audible, echoing in the emptiness like a lost whisper. He ran backstage, his footsteps pounding on the rotting wood, the sound reverberating off the crooked walls. The doors were locked, the knobs cold against his sweaty palms, and he pounded on them, his fists aching against the metal. "Let me out of here," he yelled, but the echo of his own voice was the only answer, coming back to him distorted, as if from someone else. He stopped, breathing hard, and heard something new. A slow scratching like fingernails scraping wood, coming from somewhere in the darkness. The sound was faint at first, almost a whisper, but it grew, crawling through the shadows, and Jungkook froze, his chest tight, his eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. The buzz of the lights was a roar in his ears now, pulsing in time with his heart, and he felt he was being watched, not by the mannequins, but by something else, something that knew every fear he tried to hide. He returned to the stage, his legs trembling, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He picked up the microphone again, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it, and looked at the mannequins. They seemed closer now, their heads slightly turned, their glass eyes catching the light in a way that made his stomach clench. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself, rubbing his eyes hard, his fingers leaving red marks on his skin. But when he opened his eyes, nothing had changed. He decided he needed to understand, needed to find a way out, and went down again, this time toward a half-hidden door behind a moldy curtain at the back of the theater. The fabric was rough against his fingers, smelling of mold and something sour, and when he pulled the curtain aside, a cloud of dust rose, making him cough. The door latch gave way with a dry click, and he entered a small room, the air so thick it felt like it clung to his skin. The room was a chaos of shadows and dust, the floor cold beneath his boots, the low ceiling braced with crooked beams that groaned as if the building were breathing. In the center, an old projector whirred, its flickering light casting images onto a makeshift screen, a piece of dirty fabric hanging on the wall. Jungkook approached, the sound of the projector's gears mingling with the buzzing still echoing in his head, and what he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. It was him, singing on stage the same song from minutes ago, the black jacket gleaming under the lights. But the audience in the video was alive, cheering, applauding, their faces full of emotion, hands raised in ecstasy. He blinked, confused, his heart racing, and the film cut to another scene. Him stepping down from the stage, touching the woman's shoulder, recoiling with the same horror he'd felt moments before. Only now in the video, the audience's cheers faded, their voices becoming a low murmur, then silence. The faces blanked, became white masks, and soon it was exactly what he saw in the theater. Mannequins, all identical, staring at the stage with dead eyes. The projector whirred, the film restarting, and Jungkook felt his mind reeling, a knot of doubt and fear tightening his throat. "Is this a trick? A recording?" he murmured, touching the screen, his fingers trembling against the rough, cold fabric. He turned, fumbling for the projector's cord, and yanked the plug from the socket. The whirring stopped for an instant, but then returned, louder, as if the machine had a life of its own. Jungkook backed away, his heart in his throat, and heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the stage. The sound cut through the air like a knife, echoing off the walls, and he ran out of the room, the curtains slapping against his face as he returned to the theater. There, under the yellow lights, stood a man. It was him, Jungkook, but not quite. The same face, the same black hair falling over his forehead, but the eyes were deep set, dark, like bottomless pits, and the smile was crooked, too wide, showing teeth that gleamed unnervingly. The figure held a microphone, his posture relaxed, and spoke. "They loved you." The voice was his, but distorted, full of static, like a badly tuned radio, echoing inside Jungkook's head as if it came from within him. Jungkook stumbled back, his legs weak, the floor seeming to give way beneath him. "Who are you?" he yelled, his voice cracking, but the figure just laughed, a dry, sharp sound that echoed off the rafters. The other Jungkook advanced, his steps slow, the microphone swinging in his hand like a weapon. "You sang so well," it said, the voice clearer now but still wrong, laden with something that made the hairs on the back of Jungkook's neck stand up. "They came for you. I brought them for you." Jungkook looked at the mannequins, their plastic faces gleaming under the lights, their glassy eyes fixed on the stage, and felt an emptiness growing inside him, a hole swallowing every thought. He ran toward the projector room again, stumbling over a chair in his path. The crash echoing in the silence, but the film still played, the flickering light showing himself, trapped in an endless loop. The other Jungkook was closer now, his smile widening, his dark eyes fixed on him. "You don't understand, do you?" it said, stopping just a few feet away, the air between them heavy like smoke. "You're perfect, but I'm better." And then everything changed. The theater trembled, the lights flickering violently, and Jungkook felt a pull, as if something were tearing him from his own body. He blinked, and suddenly he was in the audience, seated, rigid, looking at the stage. He couldn't move. His hands were hard, cold, fused to the armrests of the chair, the rough wood against skin he could no longer feel. He tried to scream, but his mouth wouldn't open, his lips sealed as if sewn shut. On stage, the other Jungkook sang, his voice perfect, his movements fluid, while the mannequins stared back in silence, their plastic faces reflecting the lights like broken mirrors. He slowly realized what had happened. He wasn't himself anymore. The body on stage was his, warm, alive, real, but he was here, trapped, a figure of wood and plastic, his painted eyes forever open, staring at a world he couldn't reach. The real Jungkook, what was left of him, watched as the imposter finished the song, the voice echoing through the theater as if it were his own, as if it had always been his. The truth cut like a blade, sharp and cold. Months ago, an obsessed fan had kidnapped him, brought him to this forgotten theater at the end of the world, created a replica, a false Jungkook, a perfect copy with living eyes and a deceptive smile, and sent it out into the world, while he, the original, was transformed into this, a mannequin, a living memory, forced to watch his life being stolen piece by piece. The projector had been his mind, projecting what he wanted to remember, what he wanted to be, a cruel illusion that had kept him trapped while the imposter took his place. But now it was too late. The lights went out one by one, the buzzing dying in the air like a final sigh. The imposter left the stage, his footsteps echoing on the wood, the microphone falling with a hollow thud that reverberated through the empty theater. Silence took over everything, thick and suffocating, and Jungkook, the mannequin, felt a tear slide down his wooden face, a warm drop he couldn't wipe away, couldn't feel beyond the weight it carried. He remained there in the darkness, hearing the distant sound of applause that was never meant for him, an echo lost in the shadows. Who had he been? Who was he now? The question lingered, a loose thread in his mind, a whisper trapped in the void, as the Star Theatre sank back into silence, taking what was left of Jungkook with it. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe, hit the like button, and comment what you thought. Pick a link on the screen for more stories.